Rain hammered the streets of downtown Atlanta like a warning from heaven. Blue lights flashed across soaked pavement beside a shattered red Ferrari parked near an abandoned warehouse district. A crowd gathered beneath umbrellas, phones raised high, recording another public humiliation nobody intended to stop. Franklin Hayes stood with his palms against the ruined hood. Water dripped from his silver-gray suit jacket while a county deputy shoved him harder against the metal. The deputy smiled like cruelty was entertainment instead of abuse. "You think people like you deserve cars like this?" Deputy Connor Pike shouted. Franklin kept his breathing controlled. Years inside federal investigations had taught him discipline during chaos. Anger was expensive. Patience built cases. 3 hours earlier, Franklin woke before sunrise inside his quiet home outside Decatur, Georgia. Soft jazz drifted through the kitchen while coffee brewed beside old family photographs. Sundays normally belonged to memory, reflection, and his mother's cooking. He paused before a framed photograph resting near the dining room window. A younger Franklin stood beside his father, Walter Hayes, during a Marine Corps retirement ceremony in Savannah nearly 20 years earlier. Walter wore a cheap suit and proud smile beneath humid Georgia skies. Walter Hayes spent 42 years delivering mail across Atlanta neighborhoods forgotten by politicians and developers. He survived poverty, military service, racism, and cancer without losing his dignity. Franklin learned resilience by watching his father wake before dawn every morning. When Franklin became an FBI agent, Walter celebrated quietly. He simply placed one rough hand upon his son's shoulder and whispered, "Walk straight when the world bends crooked." Franklin never forgot those words. Near the photograph sat another reminder of unfinished love. Inside a polished wooden case rested Walter's folded American flag from his funeral. Franklin touched the glass gently before leaving for the garage. The Ferrari waited beneath soft overhead lights like a sacred object instead of transportation. Rosso Corsa paint glowed deep crimson beneath the darkness. Franklin bought the car 6 months earlier after years of saving and sacrifice. Walter once dreamed about owning a Ferrari. Every Sunday after church, father and son walked past a luxury dealership near Peachtree Street. Walter always stopped beside the window display and stared at the red sports cars inside. "One day, Frankie," he would say softly, "one day we'll ride through Atlanta like kings." Cancer stole that dream before retirement ever arrived. During Walter's final hospital stay, tubes filled his arms while winter rain struck the windows outside. Franklin held his father's trembling hand as machines beeped around them. Walter smiled weakly. "Promise me something," he whispered. "Anything, Dad." "Buy the red one someday, even if I'm not there to see it." Franklin kept that promise. Now the Ferrari represented grief transformed into purpose. He drove it carefully, respectfully, never for attention. Every mile felt like another conversation with his father. That Sunday afternoon, Franklin planned a peaceful drive toward Millbrook County to visit his mother before dinner. He skipped, carrying his FBI credentials, because he wanted one normal day without federal responsibility attached to his name. The mistake would nearly destroy his life. Warm southern air rolled through the Ferrari's open windows while Franklin crossed Interstate 20 eastbound. Gospel music played quietly from the speakers. His mother called halfway through the drive. "You better not speed in that expensive toy," she warned playfully. Franklin laughed. "Mama, I investigate criminals. I know traffic laws better than anybody." "That badge doesn't protect black men from foolish officers," she answered. Her words lingered longer than either expected. 40 minutes later, Franklin entered Millbrook County. Wealthy neighborhoods lined the highway beside gated communities and polished church campuses. Confederate statues still stood proudly outside older government buildings despite years of protest. At a gas station near the county line, Franklin noticed a sheriff's cruiser parked beside the diesel pumps. Deputy Connor Pike watched him carefully through mirrored sunglasses. Not the Ferrari, him. Franklin recognized the stare immediately. Every successful black man in America recognized it eventually. Suspicion disguised as authority. Connor Pike was 36 years old, with a history hidden behind union protections and sealed complaints. 7 excessive force allegations, 4 racial profiling accusations. Zero discipline, the county protected productive officers, especially white ones. Pike watched Franklin finish pumping gas before quietly radioing dispatch. Running plates on a red Ferrari, he muttered. Driver appears nervous, requesting backup nearby. Franklin returned to the highway unaware another patrol vehicle had begun following behind him. Rain clouds gathered overhead as the road narrowed into isolated stretches lined with pine trees. Franklin checked his mirrors calmly. The cruiser remained close. Then blue lights exploded behind him. Franklin sighed once and guided the Ferrari carefully toward the shoulder. Hands visible, movement slow, voice respectful. Every black parent in America taught those rules eventually. Deputy Pike approached the driver's window with one hand resting near his holster. Rain dripped from his hat brim while another deputy remained beside the cruiser watching silently. License and registration, Pike ordered. Franklin spoke calmly. My wallet is inside my jacket pocket. Registration is in the glove compartment. I'm reaching slowly. Pike examined the documents before glancing across the Ferrari's luxurious interior, leather seats, carbon fiber dashboard, Italian stitching. His expression darkened immediately. What exactly do you do for work? Pike asked. Federal employment, Franklin answered carefully. Pike smirked. Federal meaning welfare office, postal service. Franklin remained silent. The deputy suddenly spat across the Ferrari's hood. Rain carried the saliva slowly across crimson paint. Step out of the vehicle, Pike demanded. Franklin's heartbeat slowed instead of rising. Instinct warned him danger had already arrived, and somewhere above the storm clouds gathering over Millbrook County, fate quietly prepared to change every life involved. Deputy Connor Pike jerked the Ferrari's door open hard enough to strain the hinges. Rain blew sideways across the highway while thunder rolled through distant Georgia hills. Franklin Hayes stepped carefully onto the wet pavement with both hands visible. He already understood the situation had nothing to do with traffic laws. Pike shoved Franklin against the Ferrari's hood with unnecessary force. The metal felt cold beneath his cheek. Passing vehicles slowed while drivers stared from behind fogged windows. Spread your legs wider, Pike barked. Franklin complied without argument. 14 years investigating corruption taught him an important lesson. Dangerous men became reckless when they believed nobody powerful watched them. Deputy Travis Cole climbed from the second patrol vehicle and approached slowly. Younger than Pike, thinner, visibly uncomfortable, his eyes avoided Franklin completely. Search the car, Pike ordered. Franklin inhaled slowly. Officer, I do not consent to searches without probable cause. Pike laughed sharply. Listen to this educated thug talking legal language. Cole hesitated beside the Ferrari. Connor, maybe we should just write the citation and move on. Pike turned immediately. You giving orders now? Cole stepped backward quietly. Franklin watched everything carefully. Fear controlled Deputy Cole. Power intoxicated Connor Pike. And silence protected both men. Pike began tearing through the Ferrari violently. Registration papers scattered across soaked leather seats. The glove compartment emptied onto the floorboards beside Franklin's sunglasses and family photographs. Then Pike discovered the framed picture resting beneath the passenger seat. Walter Hayes, smiling proudly beside young Franklin during Marine Corps retirement ceremonies. Pike studied the photograph briefly. Your daddy military? He asked mockingly. United States Marine Corps citoyen, Franklin answered quietly. Betty never imagined his son driving drug money around Georgia. Something sharp twisted inside Franklin's chest. Still, he remained calm. That restraint would later save him. Across the highway, an older woman slowed her silver SUV near the roadside scene. Evelyn Carter, 68 years old, retired history teacher, lifelong Millbrook resident. She noticed the black man pinned against the Ferrari immediately. Then she noticed the deputy smiling. That smile disturbed her deeply. Evelyn pulled safely onto the shoulder farther ahead and quietly reached for her phone. Back beside the Ferrari, Pike grew increasingly frustrated while searching unsuccessfully for evidence. No drugs, no weapons, no cash bundles, nothing except expensive taste and personal dignity. To men like Connor Pike, dignity itself felt suspicious. Rain intensified while traffic continued slowing nearby. A teenage boy leaned from a pickup truck window, holding his phone toward Franklin. "World star," he shouted, laughing. Nobody intervened. America had grown too accustomed to public humiliation. Pike slammed the Ferrari's passenger door angrily. "Where'd you really get this money?" he demanded. "I purchased the vehicle legally," Franklin answered. "Bullshit." Pike suddenly removed his keys from his pocket. Deputy Cole shifted nervously. "Connor, don't." The first scratch cut deep across the Ferrari's paint. Metal screamed beneath the keys. Franklin closed his eyes briefly. Walter Hayes, standing beside dealership windows. Walter coughing weakly inside hospital rooms. Walter whispering one final dream. The second scratch ran longer. Pike grinned while carving destruction across the passenger door. "Maybe next time," he sneered, "buy something matching your neighborhood." Deputy Cole looked physically sick now. "This isn't necessary," he muttered. Pike ignored him completely. Then the deputy kicked the Ferrari's side mirror hard enough to shatter glass across the roadway. Franklin finally spoke louder. "Your dashboard camera records audio and video continuously," he said evenly. Pike's grin disappeared. For one brief second, uncertainty crossed his face, then arrogance returned stronger than before. "Funny thing," Pike answered casually. "Camera malfunctioned earlier today." He reached toward his body camera and deliberately powered it off. Evelyn Carter captured everything from inside her SUV. Every word, every kick, every scratch. Pike suddenly grabbed Franklin by the collar and forced him downward onto wet asphalt. "Stop resisting," he shouted loudly. Franklin remained completely still. Deputy Cole stared in disbelief. "He isn't resisting," he whispered. Pike cuffed Franklin aggressively while rainwater pooled beneath them. Cars continued slowing nearby. More phones appeared from windows. Public spectacle, modern entertainment. Pike hauled Franklin upright and shoved him toward the cruiser. "You're under arrest for resisting detention, obstruction, and reckless driving." "I never resisted," Franklin answered calmly. Pike leaned closer. "Nobody cares what you say." Those words echoed louder than thunder. "Nobody cares." Franklin sat silently inside the patrol vehicle while rain hammered the roof overhead. Through the window, he watched Pike circle the Ferrari again, like a hunter admiring wounded prey. Then Pike climbed inside his cruiser. Deputy Cole frowned immediately. "Connor, what are you doing?" Pike reversed 20 feet backward. Franklin's stomach tightened. Evelyn Carter lowered her phone slightly, confused. Then Pike accelerated hard. The patrol cruiser slammed violently into the Ferrari's front end. Metal exploded across the roadway. Glass burst outward beneath flashing police lights. The Ferrari spun slightly before collapsing against the guardrail, with steam hissing from the crushed engine compartment. Walter Hayes's dream died beside a Georgia highway under cold rain and public applause. Connor Pike stepped calmly from the cruiser, smiling faintly. "Looks accidental to me," he announced. Deputy Cole stared at the destruction, speechless. Evelyn Carter's hands trembled around her phone. Inside the patrol vehicle, Franklin Hayes watched smoke rise from the ruined Ferrari without speaking a single word. But behind his silence, something dangerous had awakened. Not rage. Resolve. The Millbrook County Sheriff's Department smelled like burnt coffee, mildew, and old frustration. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, while exhausted deputies shuffled paperwork between stained desks. Franklin Hayes sat silently inside a holding cell, wearing handcuffs that bit against his wrists. Rainwater still soaked through his ruined dress shirt. Deputy Connor Pike walked through the booking area, grinning proudly like a man returning from a successful hunt. Several younger deputies listened while he exaggerated the roadside confrontation. "Guy acted dangerous from the start," Pike claimed loudly, kept reaching around inside the car. Franklin remained quiet. Truth mattered less than paperwork inside buildings like this. The booking officer finally approached the holding cell carrying a clipboard. Denise Walker, 53 years old, divorced, exhausted, surviving 28 years inside county law enforcement through careful silence. She unlocked the cell and motioned Franklin toward the processing desk. "Full name?" "Franklin James Hayes." "Occupation?" Franklin paused briefly. Timing mattered now. "Federal employment," he answered. Denise glanced upward carefully. Something about Franklin felt different from ordinary detainees. Calm posture, controlled breathing, no fear in his eyes despite obvious humiliation. Experienced, dangerous in a different way. Still, she continued processing forms. Any gang affiliations? Franklin almost smiled. No. Connor Pike entered carrying a fresh incident report and tossed it onto the desk. Got another rich criminal off the streets, he announced proudly. Denise scanned the report quickly. Reckless driving, resisting arrest, attempted assault on an officer, vehicle collision during lawful detention. Every line smelled false. Yet Denise signed the intake paperwork anyway. Mortgage payments required compromise. Franklin noticed the hesitation in her eyes. Another witness trapped inside the machinery. Meanwhile, across Millbrook County, Evelyn Carter sat trembling inside her kitchen while local news stations replayed cell phone footage from the highway. Her grandson uploaded the video online less than an hour earlier. Already thousands shared it. The comments flooded faster every minute. That officer destroyed the car on purpose. Another racist deputy. Watch the victim stay calm the entire time. Evelyn stared at the screen in disbelief. She never expected national attention. She simply recorded because conscience demanded action. Back inside the sheriff's department, Connor Pike entered Sergeant Melissa Grant's office carrying coffee and confidence. Grant supervised patrol operations across Millbrook County for nearly 12 years. Sharp-minded, politically connected, fiercely protective of deputies generating high arrest numbers, especially Connor Pike. Internet's blowing up already, Pike laughed while sitting down. Grant reviewed the incident report silently. Body camera footage? Battery died during the stop. Grant looked directly at him. Convenient, Pike shrugged carelessly. Nobody's proving anything from some edited cell phone clip. Grant leaned backward thoughtfully. The department survived scandals before. Usually complaints disappeared after public outrage faded. Small-town memory rarely lasted longer than football season. Still, something unsettled her. "Who exactly is this guy?" she asked. "Just another loudmouth pretending money makes him important." Grant nodded slowly. "Keep your story consistent." Those 5 words would later destroy careers. Inside his holding cell, Franklin finally requested his single phone call. He dialed his mother first. "Franklin," she answered immediately. "You were supposed to arrive hours ago." His voice softened. "I'm okay, Mama." Silence, then quiet fear. "What happened?" Franklin stared through steel bars toward deputies laughing nearby. A misunderstanding turned ugly. "Did police stop you?" Mothers always knew. "Yes." She inhaled sharply. "Baby, tell me where you are right now." Franklin closed his eyes briefly. Millbrook County Sheriff's Department. Another silence followed. Longer, he heard old pain inside her breathing. Memories older than him. Civil rights marches, police dogs, southern sheriffs smiling beside violence. "Are you hurt?" she whispered. "Nothing permanent." His mother's voice hardened unexpectedly. "You call your people immediately. Don't protect anybody." Franklin almost answered. Instead, he studied the booking area carefully. Deputies relaxed, paperwork filed, false reports finalized. The corruption already committed itself officially, exactly what he needed. "Tomorrow," Franklin said quietly. "I'll handle everything tomorrow." He ended the call, then he dialed another number from memory. Assistant Special Agent Jerome Mitchell answered after 2 rings. "Mitchell, sir, it's Hayes." A pause. "Why are you calling from county jail?" Franklin glanced toward security cameras. "Because local deputies just handed Public Corruption Division the cleanest civil rights case we've seen in years." Mitchell's voice changed instantly, cold, focused. "Explain." Franklin described everything calmly. The stop, the destruction, the fake charges, the disabled body camera. Mitchell interrupted only once. "Did you identify yourself?" "Only partially." "Good." Franklin understood immediately. Experienced investigators thought alike. If county officials realized they assaulted a federal agent too early, evidence would disappear overnight. Mitchell lowered his voice. "Stay exactly where you are. Don't reveal anything else. Let them finish burying themselves first." Franklin nodded despite being alone. already happening. After ending the call, he returned quietly to the holding cell. Outside, thunder rolled across Millbrook County while social media exploded nationwide. News stations replayed the crushed Ferrari repeatedly. Civil rights organizations demanded investigations. Activists organized protests online. Connor Pike still believed none of it mattered. Inside Sergeant Grant's office, however, nervous whispers had already begun, because somebody finally ran Franklin Hayes' name through a federal database. And suddenly, the entire sheriff's department realized the man inside their holding cell was not an ordinary citizen. He was one of the FBI's most respected corruption investigators, and they had just handed him evidence against themselves. Assistant Special Agent Jerome Mitchell arrived at FBI Atlanta headquarters before sunrise. Fog drifted across downtown streets while agents hurried through security checkpoints, carrying coffee and classified files. Mitchell walked directly into the Public Corruption Division without greeting anyone. His expression warned people not to ask questions. Inside the conference room, 4 senior agents already waited beside a projection screen, displaying frozen images from Evelyn Carter's cell phone footage. The destroyed Ferrari dominated the screen. Mitchell tossed Franklin Hayes' personnel file onto the table. "Millbrook County arrested one of ours yesterday," he announced. Silence filled the room immediately. Everyone knew Franklin Hayes. 14 years investigating corrupt officials across Georgia and Alabama. Decorated Marine veteran. Quiet professional. Exceptional under pressure. The kind of agent younger investigators studied carefully. Mitchell pointed toward the screen. Local deputy destroyed Franklin's vehicle during an illegal traffic stop. False charges already filed. Body camera intentionally disabled. Senior Agent Rebecca Torres folded her arms tightly. Witnesses? Civilian footage already viral online, millions of views overnight. Another agent leaned forward. Did Hayes reveal his credentials? Mitchell shook his head slowly. Only enough to warn them. They ignored him anyway. Rebecca Torres exhaled sharply. Then they buried themselves voluntarily. Yeah. Exactly. Mitchell began assigning responsibilities immediately. Digital forensics, financial records, internal affairs coordination, federal civil rights violations. Every available resource shifted toward Millbrook County before sunrise fully reached Atlanta. Meanwhile, inside the sheriff's department, panic spread quietly through administrative offices. Sergeant Melissa Grant stared at Franklin's federal employment records displayed across her computer monitor. Public Corruption Division, multiple commendations, federal task force leadership, direct connections inside the Department of Justice. Her stomach tightened painfully. Connor Pike entered carrying another coffee. "Why's everybody acting nervous?" he asked casually. Grant turned the monitor toward him. Pike's confidence disappeared instantly. "No," he whispered. "Yes," Grant answered coldly. Pike scanned the file again. FBI Special Agent Franklin James Hayes. Decorated investigator. Expert witness in dozens of corruption trials. Pike stepped backward slowly. "He never showed me a badge." Grant stood sharply. "He identified himself as federal law enforcement. You mocked him and destroyed his car anyway." Pike's breathing quickened. "We can fix this." Grant laughed bitterly. "Fix it, Connor. Millions of people already watched you ram a Ferrari with your patrol cruiser." Downstairs, Deputy Travis Cole sat alone inside the locker room, staring at his reflection. He barely slept all night. Every moment replayed repeatedly inside his mind. The scratches, the laughter, Franklin lying motionless on wet asphalt. Cole joined law enforcement believing he could help communities feel safer. Yesterday shattered that illusion permanently. His phone vibrated suddenly. Unknown number. He answered cautiously. "Deputy Cole," a calm female voice said. "This is Special Agent Rebecca Torres with the FBI. We need to discuss yesterday's incident." Cole closed his eyes. The reckoning had arrived faster than expected. Across town, television crews gathered outside Millbrook County Sheriff's Department despite heavy rain. Protesters carried signs demanding accountability, while reporters broadcast hourly updates. Local politicians suddenly condemned racial profiling after years ignoring complaints. Public pressure transformed cowards into activists overnight. Inside her modest church office, Evelyn Carter watched everything unfold with disbelief. Her pastor placed fresh coffee beside her trembling hands. "You did the right thing," he assured gently. Evelyn stared through stained glass windows while rain streaked downward outside. "I almost drove away," she admitted quietly. The pastor nodded. "But you didn't." Back inside the sheriff's department, Franklin Hayes remained alone inside his holding cell. Calm, patient, observing. Experienced investigators understood one truth better than anyone. Pressure revealed character. Already deputies avoided eye contact while walking past his cell. Nervous whispers echoed through hallways. Phones rang constantly inside administrative offices. The walls themselves seemed anxious. Then footsteps approached. Sheriff Daniel Mercer unlocked the cell personally. Mercer built his political career promising law and order across Millbrook County. Clean image, friendly smile, deep relationships with wealthy donors. Now sweat darkened his collar. "Agent Hayes," he began carefully, "there appears to have been a misunderstanding yesterday." Franklin looked up slowly. "A misunderstanding destroyed my property and violated my constitutional rights." Mercer swallowed hard. "We're prepared to release you immediately pending further review." Franklin stood calmly. "You already processed false charges officially." Mercer forced a weak smile. "Administrative errors happen sometimes." Franklin stepped closer, not usually on video. The sheriff's expression tightened. Before he could respond, the front entrance exploded with sudden movement. Heavy footsteps, multiple voices. Federal agents entering aggressively. Jerome Mitchell led the group through the lobby wearing a dark overcoat, still wet from Atlanta rainstorms. 8 FBI agents followed behind, carrying evidence cases and legal documents. Every deputy inside the building froze. Mitchell approached the holding cells without slowing. Sheriff Mercer attempted professionalism. "Agent Mitchell, we were just resolving this unfortunate situation." Mitchell ignored him completely. Instead, he focused entirely on Franklin. "You all right?" Franklin nodded once. "Been worse places." Mitchell unlocked the cell personally. Then he finally turned toward the room. The silence felt dangerous. "Nobody leaves this building," Mitchell announced. "Effective immediately, the FBI is assuming jurisdiction over the Hayes investigation and all related departmental conduct." Several deputies exchanged frightened glances. Mitchell continued. "Phones stay visible. Computers remain untouched. Any deleted files, altered reports, or missing evidence from this moment forward become federal obstruction charges." Connor Pike entered from the hallway, carrying forced confidence like armor. "This is ridiculous," he snapped. The suspect resisted arrest. Mitchell stared at him without emotion. "You destroyed a federal agent's vehicle while violating his civil rights on camera." Pike opened his mouth again. Mitchell stepped closer. "And right now," he said quietly, "your entire career just became evidence." Across the lobby, Deputy Travis Cole lowered his head, because deep inside, he already knew something terrifying. Connor Pike would not fall alone. FBI agents spread through Millbrook County Sheriff's Department like a storm swallowing dry ground. Evidence technicians photographed computers, while federal attorneys delivered preservation orders directly to frightened administrators. Deputies suddenly discovered urgent reasons to avoid conversation. Connor Pike stood motionless near the booking desk, watching his authority evaporate in real time. Jerome Mitchell approached him slowly. "Deputy Pike," he said calmly, "you are ordered to surrender your service weapon immediately pending federal investigation." Pike laughed nervously. "You can't disarm me without departmental approval." Sheriff Mercer interrupted quickly. "Do it, Connor." Pike turned sharply. "Sheriff, this is political theater." "Do it now," Mercer repeated. The deputy's jaw tightened. Every eye inside the station followed his movements. Finally, Pike removed his weapon and placed it carefully upon the counter. The sound echoed through the building, heavier than gunfire. Nearby, Franklin Hayes watched silently beside Agent Rebecca Torres. His wrists still carried faint red marks from handcuffs. Torres noticed them immediately. "Medical evaluation first," she said quietly. Franklin shook his head. "Evidence first." That answer alone explained why agents respected him. Inside the department conference room, FBI investigators projected Evelyn Carter's footage onto a large monitor. Every deputy present watched their own department unravel frame by frame. Pike scratching the Ferrari, Pike kicking the mirror apart, Pike reversing deliberately before accelerating directly into the vehicle. No ambiguity remained. Deputy Travis Cole sat pale and shaking near the wall. Mitchell paused the footage exactly where Pike smiled after the collision. Anybody here want to explain that expression? Nobody answered, because corruption depended upon silence, and silence had finally collapsed. Meanwhile, outside the sheriff's department, protest crowds doubled by noon. Rain stopped completely while television helicopters circled overhead, broadcasting live coverage across Georgia. Community activists shouted through megaphones demanding federal arrests. Mothers carried photographs of sons previously stopped by Millbrook deputies. Old complaints suddenly returned from forgotten drawers. One local mechanic spoke to reporters about deputies slashing his tires years earlier. A black realtor described being searched beside her children during church trips. A retired Army veteran displayed scars from an arrest nobody investigated. Franklin Hayes was not the beginning. He was merely the first victim powerful enough to force attention. Inside Internal Affairs offices upstairs, Rebecca Torres interviewed Deputy Travis Cole privately. Cole stared at untouched coffee while his leg bounced nervously beneath the table. "Tell me everything," Torres said calmly. Cole swallowed hard. Connor planned it from the gas station. Torres remained silent, encouraging continuation. He saw the Ferrari and immediately assumed drugs or theft. Said rich black men always hide something. Cole rubbed trembling hands together. "I should have stopped him." "Why didn't you?" Cole looked toward the window. "Because everyone protects him. Sergeant Grant, Sheriff Mercer, the Union. Complaints disappear around Connor Pike like magic." Torres leaned forward slightly. "How many previous incidents?" Cole hesitated, then conscience finally outweighed fear. "More than I can count." Those words changed everything. Across the hall, digital forensic teams examined Pike's body camera personally. A technician connected the device to federal recovery software while Mitchell observed quietly. After several tense minutes, the technician looked upward. "Camera functioned normally," he confirmed. Mitchell crossed his arms. "Meaning?" "The recording stopped because someone manually powered the unit down." Another federal felony. Mitchell almost felt grateful for Pike's arrogance. Careless men built strong prosecutions. At Atlanta news stations, journalists uncovered older complaints against Millbrook County deputies throughout the afternoon. Archived lawsuits resurfaced online. Settlement agreements appeared publicly for the first time. Patterns emerged quickly. Black drivers, luxury vehicles, traffic stops without citations, destroyed property labeled accidental. Public trust collapsed hour by hour. Back inside the sheriff's department, Sergeant Melissa Grant finally requested legal representation. Mitchell watched her carefully across the conference table. "Smart decision," he admitted. Grant removed her glasses slowly. "You people act like this department invented racial profiling." Mitchell's expression never changed. "No, we're acting like your department normalized it." Grant looked exhausted suddenly, years of compromised ethics pressed visibly upon her shoulders. "The county wanted numbers," she whispered. "Traffic stops, drug seizures, aggressive policing." Connor produced results. By terrorizing innocent citizens. Grant lowered her eyes. "Nobody wanted scandals." Mitchell answered coldly. "Now you have one." Franklin finally stepped outside during late afternoon beneath clearing skies. Protesters recognized him immediately. Phones rose, news cameras rushed closer. Questions exploded everywhere. "Agent Hayes, do you believe this was racially motivated? Will you sue the department? How much damage was done to the Ferrari?" Franklin paused beside the courthouse steps. Wind moved softly through nearby trees while distant sirens echoed downtown. He looked toward the crowd carefully. Then he answered quietly, "This was never about a car." Silence spread unexpectedly. "The Ferrari mattered because it represented my father's life. But what happened yesterday happens to ordinary people every day, without cameras, lawyers, or federal attention." Reporters lowered microphones slightly. Franklin continued, "Most victims never receive justice. Most are forgotten before headlines disappear." His voice hardened. That should disturb every American. Behind him, FBI agents escorted Connor Pike through side doors toward an interview room upstairs. For the first time since the traffic stop, fear finally appeared inside Pike's eyes, because he now understood a terrible truth. Franklin Hayes was not trapped in Millbrook County with him. Connor Pike was trapped with the FBI. Connor Pike sat inside a narrow federal interview room beneath cold fluorescent lighting. The confidence he carried for years now cracked visibly around the edges. Sweat darkened his uniform collar while federal agents arranged printed evidence across the steel table. Photographs, video stills, complaint records, destroyed careers waiting patiently. Rebecca Torres entered first carrying a thick case file. Jerome Mitchell followed behind her without speaking. Pike attempted bravado immediately. "I want a union representative." Mitchell nodded calmly. Already contacted, they advised cooperation. That answer unsettled Pike more than anger would have. Torres sat across from him and opened the file deliberately. "Deputy Pike, we recovered your body camera metadata." Pike remained silent. "The device functioned normally until you manually disabled recording at exactly 2:32 p.m. Still silence. Torres slid another photograph forward. Franklin Hayes pinned against the Ferrari. "Then you vandalized private property while violating constitutional protections under color of law." Pike scoffed weakly. The guy resisted. Mitchell finally spoke. "No, he didn't." His voice carried terrifying calmness. "And deep down, you already know we can prove that." Outside the interview room, Deputy Travis Cole completed his official statement while attorneys recorded every word carefully. His hands still shook whenever describing the collision. "Connor enjoyed it," Cole admitted quietly. "That's the worst part." The federal stenographer looked upward briefly. Cole continued. "When he scratched the Ferrari, he smiled like somebody getting revenge for something personal." "Did Agent Hayes threaten officers?" "No." "Did he resist?" "No." "Did Deputy Pike intentionally ram the vehicle?" Cole closed his eyes. "Yes." One honest answer dismantled years of institutional protection. Meanwhile, Franklin Hayes sat alone inside a temporary FBI workspace overlooking downtown Millbrook. Evening sunlight filtered through dusty blinds while agents rushed through hallways outside. The noise faded behind memory. He pictured Walter Hayes again. Summer evenings outside small Atlanta apartments, cheap folding chairs beside crowded sidewalks. His father explaining survival rules every black son eventually learned. "Never confuse being right with being safe," Walter once warned gently. Franklin understood those words completely now. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Jerome Mitchell entered, carrying 2 coffees. "Media wants another statement," he said. Franklin accepted the cup quietly. "Not interested." Mitchell sat across from him. "Your face already dominates every major network." Franklin stared toward the window. "Which means undercover work is finished." The room fell silent. That loss hurt deeper than public humiliation. Franklin spent 14 years building trust inside criminal organizations, corrupt political circles, and dangerous investigations. His anonymity had been essential. Now millions recognized him. Connor Pike destroyed more than a Ferrari beside that highway. Mitchell studied his longtime colleague carefully. "You saved stronger cases than this with less evidence," he reminded. Franklin nodded slowly. "I know." "Then why do you look like someone died?" Franklin's voice softened. "Because something did." Back at the sheriff's department, Sheriff Daniel Mercer faced county commissioners during an emergency closed-door meeting. Tension poisoned the room immediately. One commissioner slammed newspapers across the table. National headlines screamed everywhere. Federal agent targeted during racial traffic stop. County deputy destroys Ferrari in viral video. Another Southern police scandal. Mercer wiped sweat from his forehead. "We're cooperating fully with federal authorities." Commissioner Harold Whitmore leaned forward angrily. "Cooperation won't stop lawsuits. Businesses are already calling my office, threatening relocation." Another commissioner spoke sharply. "How many prior complaints did Pike have?" Mercer hesitated too long. Everybody noticed. The room shifted immediately from damage control toward self-preservation. Outside, protesters continued gathering beneath courthouse lights despite approaching nightfall. Church leaders marched beside college students while veterans carried American flags through crowded streets. Some signs demanded reform, others demanded arrests. One elderly black man held a handwritten poster reading, "I survived 1963. Why are we still here?" Evelyn Carter stood quietly near the edge of the crowd, wearing a raincoat and carrying groceries she never unpacked earlier. Several strangers recognized her from interviews. They thanked her repeatedly. Evelyn accepted awkwardly. She still didn't feel brave, only responsible. Inside federal custody upstairs, Connor Pike's interview continued deteriorating rapidly. Torres placed 7 older complaint files across the table. "All black drivers," she observed. Pike shifted uncomfortably. "Coincidence?" Mitchell slid forward photographs from previous incidents. Damaged luxury vehicles, broken mirrors, scratched paint, slashed tires, always labeled accidental. "7 coincidences?" Mitchell asked. Pike's breathing quickened. The walls suddenly felt much smaller. "You people already decided I'm guilty," he muttered. Mitchell leaned closer. "No, Deputy Pike. You decided that yourself on the highway." Late that evening, FBI forensic accountants completed preliminary financial reviews of Pike's records. Several expensive purchases immediately raised suspicion. Cash deposits inconsistent with salary. Unreported income. Private security payments from local businessmen. Mitchell reviewed the findings carefully. Then he smiled slightly for the first time all day. Because corruption almost never traveled alone. And somewhere inside Millbrook County's political machine, other powerful men suddenly realized Connor Pike might start talking. Federal investigators executed search warrants across Millbrook County before sunrise. Black SUVs rolled through quiet neighborhoods while agents carried sealed evidence boxes from government offices beneath flashing cameras. Residents watched from porches, whispering rumors into cold morning air. Millbrook County finally looked afraid of its own police department. Connor Pike remained inside federal detention, awaiting formal charges. He barely slept during the night. Every closed eye brought back the sound of crushing metal against Franklin Hayes' Ferrari. Not because he regretted destroying the car, because he regretted choosing the wrong victim. Inside another interview room, federal prosecutors reviewed possible charges carefully. Civil rights violations, destruction of property, obstruction of justice, evidence tampering, conspiracy. Each count carried years of prison exposure. Pike's attorney, Martin Keller, arrived shortly after dawn, wearing an expensive suit and visible frustration. "You're in catastrophic trouble," Keller admitted immediately. Pike paced restlessly. "This whole thing became political because he's FBI." Keller stared at him. "No, it became catastrophic because millions watched you commit multiple felonies on camera." That truth landed harder than any insult. Meanwhile, Franklin Hayes returned briefly to his Decatur home under federal protection. News vans already lined nearby streets, while neighbors peeked carefully through curtains. Inside the garage, the empty parking space felt haunting. Oil stains remained where the Ferrari once rested beneath soft overhead lights. Franklin stood there silently. No anger, no tears, just absence. His mother arrived unexpectedly carrying homemade sweet potato pie and worry hidden behind strength. Eleanor Hayes hugged her son tightly before stepping into the garage. Then she noticed the empty space. Her expression changed instantly. "They really destroyed it," she whispered. Franklin nodded. Eleanor walked slowly toward the vacant spot while memories filled the silence between them. Walter Hayes laughing beside dealership windows, Walter dreaming impossible dreams during impossible years. Finally, she touched Franklin's arm gently. "Your father cared about the promise," she said softly, "not the car itself." Franklin looked away. "Still feels like I failed him." Eleanor's voice hardened unexpectedly. "No, the failure belongs to the man who saw your success and hated you for it." Across town, FBI financial investigators uncovered deeper corruption spreading beyond Connor Pike. Internal emails revealed pressure from county officials, encouraging aggressive traffic enforcement against outsiders driving above local income expectations. The language avoided race directly. It didn't need to. Mitchell reviewed the documents carefully beside Rebecca Torres. This department wasn't protecting one bad deputy, Torres observed. It was rewarding him, Mitchell answered. That distinction changed the entire case. Federal prosecutors immediately expanded the investigation. Inside Millbrook County Courthouse, Sheriff Mercer faced another crisis. Several deputies requested emergency union meetings, while others quietly contacted private attorneys. Nobody trusted anybody anymore. Fear replaced loyalty remarkably fast. Deputy Travis Cole received threats online after local media identified him as cooperating with investigators. Former colleagues stopped answering his calls. One anonymous message simply read, "Rats don't last long here." Cole sat alone inside his apartment, staring at the text message repeatedly. Then he deleted it. Because despite fear, another feeling finally outweighed silence: shame. At noon, Franklin Hayes attended a private meeting with civil rights attorney Raymond Porter inside downtown Atlanta. Porter built his reputation suing police departments across the South for decades. Silver-haired, sharp-minded, dangerously patient, he studied the evidence carefully before speaking. "Franklin, this case could change policing standards across Georgia." Franklin leaned backward quietly. "I'm not interested in becoming a symbol." Porter nodded. "Symbols rarely volunteer." He slid preliminary legal estimates across the table. Property destruction, career damages, emotional trauma, civil rights violations. Potential settlement exposure exceeded several $1 million already. Franklin barely glanced downward. Money won't repair what mattered. Porter understood immediately. Then make the lawsuit about accountability instead. Outside Atlanta, news helicopters broadcast fresh footage from Millbrook County continuously. National commentators debated systemic racism while politicians delivered rehearsed outrage on television. Some defended law enforcement broadly. Others condemned the entire department. Franklin ignored all of it. He trusted evidence more than opinion. Late that evening, Jerome Mitchell visited the impound yard personally, where the Ferrari remained under federal evidence protection. Floodlights illuminated the wreckage harshly. The front end remained crushed inward, paint scarred deeply, glass shattered across concrete. Mitchell walked slowly around the vehicle, understanding something painful. Connor Pike didn't simply destroy expensive property. He attacked meaning, memory, pride, inheritance. That realization made the crime uglier than headlines understood. Franklin arrived moments later wearing a dark overcoat against the cold. The two men stood silently beside the ruined Ferrari for several minutes. Finally, Mitchell spoke. "For what it's worth, your father would have been proud yesterday." Franklin stared toward the crushed hood. "I wanted him to ride in it someday." Mitchell answered quietly. Maybe the dream wasn't really about the car. Wind moved softly through the impound yard. Franklin looked again at the destroyed Ferrari beneath harsh lights. Then he noticed something unexpected. Someone had placed fresh flowers carefully beside the wreckage. No note, no signature, just quiet respect from a stranger. And suddenly, Franklin realized something important. Millbrook County contained more witnesses than Connor Pike ever imagined. Federal indictments arrived exactly 12 days after Connor Pike destroyed Franklin Hayes' Ferrari. News alerts exploded across phones nationwide before sunrise while reporters gathered outside the federal courthouse in Atlanta beneath freezing December rain. Former Deputy Connor Pike faced 7 criminal counts: civil rights violations, obstruction of justice, evidence tampering, destruction of property, conspiracy under color of law. The maximum sentence exceeded 20 years. Millbrook County erupted into panic. Inside the courthouse lobby, Pike walked beside federal marshals wearing a dark suit instead of his former uniform. Cameras flashed violently while reporters shouted questions from every direction. "Deputy Pike, do you regret your actions? Did racism motivate the traffic stop? Were other deputies involved?" Pike stared downward silently. For years, silence protected him. Now silence buried him. Upstairs inside federal chambers, prosecutors presented additional evidence linking Pike to previous unlawful stops. 7 older victims agreed to testify publicly after Franklin's case inspired them. One businessman described deputies slashing his Mercedes tires during a roadside search. Another victim recalled officers smashing a Rolex watch while laughing. Every story sounded painfully familiar. Humiliation, power, protection. Franklin Hayes attended none of the hearings. Instead, he sat quietly beside his mother inside her modest Decatur kitchen while homemade cornbread cooled beside the stove. Rain tapped softly against the windows outside. Eleanor Hayes studied her son carefully. "You haven't slept much," she observed. Franklin smiled faintly. "Occupational hazard." She shook her head gently. "No, this is grief." Her honesty struck harder than expected. Franklin stared toward the kitchen table where Walter Hayes once drank coffee every Sunday morning before church. Empty chairs carried their own kind of memory. "I keep hearing his voice," Franklin admitted quietly. Eleanor reached across the table. "Then listen carefully." Meanwhile, inside Millbrook County Sheriff's Department, Sergeant Melissa Grant officially resigned under mounting federal pressure. Her departure statement blamed political opportunists and media distortion. Nobody believed her. Deputy Travis Cole watched Grant carry personal belongings toward her car beneath cold afternoon winds. She paused briefly beside him. "You betrayed your own department," she said bitterly. Cole answered quietly. "No, the department betrayed itself years ago." Grant looked away immediately, because deep down she knew he was right. That same afternoon, Raymond Porter filed Franklin Hayes' civil lawsuit in federal court. Millbrook County, Sheriff Daniel Mercer, former Deputy Connor Pike. The lawsuit accused county leadership of enabling years of racial targeting and constitutional abuse through deliberate negligence. Damage estimates exceeded $8 million. County insurance providers panicked instantly. Political donors disappeared overnight. Several commissioners privately discussed forcing Sheriff Mercer's resignation before re-election campaigns collapsed completely. Millbrook County suddenly learned corruption carried financial consequences. At sunset, Franklin finally returned alone to the federal impound facility. Snow flurries drifted lightly across Atlanta highways, while security lights illuminated rows of damaged vehicles. The Ferrari waited beneath a gray tarp. Franklin pulled the cover away slowly. Even ruined, the car remained beautiful. Rosso Corsa paint still glowed beneath scattered scratches and crushed metal. Walter Hayes once dreamed beside this exact color. Franklin walked carefully around the wreckage. Then he noticed another object resting near the windshield. A handwritten letter folded neatly beneath a stone. No envelope, no name. Franklin opened it cautiously. The handwriting belonged to Evelyn Carter. "Dear Mr. Hayes, I spent 34 years teaching children that courage matters most when fear feels reasonable. Yesterday, I realized adults struggle with that lesson even more. I almost kept driving. Part of me wanted safety more than responsibility, but another part remembered the America my father fought for during World War II. He believed silence helped cruelty survive. I'm sorry about your father's dream. I'm sorry our county failed you, but please understand something important. Many of us watched what happened and finally saw truth clearly for the first time. You changed this town already. Respectfully, Evelyn Carter." Franklin lowered the letter slowly. For several moments, he simply stood beside the Ferrari while snowflakes melted against shattered glass. Then his phone vibrated. Jerome Mitchell. "You need to come downtown immediately," Mitchell said. Franklin recognized urgency instantly. "What happened?" Mitchell exhaled sharply. Financial Crimes Division uncovered payments connected to Pike from a private prison contractor. Franklin's expression hardened. "How much?" "Enough to suggest arrests generated profit bonuses." The implications settled heavily between them. Traffic stops, false arrests, destroyed lives, not simply hatred. Business. Franklin looked once more toward the wrecked Ferrari beneath falling snow. Connor Pike believed the roadside stop represented personal prejudice and unchecked ego. Now federal investigators uncovered something darker. Millbrook County's corruption might have been organized from the very beginning. The deeper federal investigators searched inside Millbrook County, the uglier the truth became. What began as one deputy's roadside abuse transformed into evidence of organized exploitation, hiding beneath law enforcement authority for years. Federal Financial Crimes Division uncovered contracts linking Millbrook County officials to Sentinel Horizons, a private detention corporation operating immigrant and state correctional facilities across the Southeast. The arrangement looked legal on paper. Performance incentives, detention quotas, budget efficiency programs. But internal emails revealed another story entirely. Arrest numbers influenced private bonuses, longer detentions increased county revenue. Aggressive traffic enforcement targeted travelers unlikely to challenge arrests publicly, especially minorities passing through wealthy counties. Connor Pike was never operating alone. Inside FBI headquarters, Franklin Hayes reviewed evidence beside Jerome Mitchell and Rebecca Torres late into the night. Coffee cups covered the conference table while exhaustion settled across every face. Torres projected financial records onto the screen. Sheriff Mercer received consulting payments from Sentinel Horizons through a shell company registered in Alabama, she explained. Franklin studied the dates carefully. The payments increased during years with rising arrest statistics. Mitchell folded his arms tightly, meaning illegal arrests became profitable policy. Nobody spoke afterward, because sometimes corruption became so large it stopped feeling human. Meanwhile, national outrage intensified beyond anything Millbrook County anticipated. Civil rights organizations demanded congressional review hearings, while cable news debated systemic policing failures nightly. Former victims contacted federal investigators hourly. Teachers, veterans, business owners, single mothers. Stories poured forward from people who stayed silent for years because silence once felt safer. Now Franklin Hayes' case gave them courage. Inside his downtown office, civil rights attorney Raymond Porter prepared aggressively for upcoming settlement negotiations. County insurers already understood disaster approaching. Porter met Franklin privately during another freezing Atlanta evening. "They want mediation before trial," Attorney Porter explained. Franklin stared through office windows toward glowing skyscrapers. "Because they're guilty." "Because they're terrified," Porter corrected. He slid preliminary settlement proposals across the desk. Several $1 million, mandatory federal oversight, department restructuring, independent civilian review boards. Franklin barely glanced downward. "I told you before. This was never about money." Porter nodded patiently. "I know, but forcing reform requires leverage." That word lingered heavily. Leverage, the same thing Connor Pike believed his badge provided. Yet now power shifted completely. Back inside Millbrook County, Sheriff Mercer finally resigned publicly after leaked financial records connected him directly to Sentinel Horizons executives. Television cameras captured him, leaving county offices through rear entrances while protesters cheered outside barricades. His political career ended within 72 hours. Several county commissioners immediately requested immunity agreements through federal attorneys. Everybody suddenly wanted cooperation. Nobody wanted prison. Deputy Travis Cole continued assisting investigators despite growing threats online. Anonymous callers targeted his family repeatedly. Still, he testified, because guilt eventually exhausted him more than fear. One evening, after another 12-hour deposition, Cole visited Franklin privately at FBI headquarters. The atmosphere between them felt painfully awkward. Cole lowered his eyes immediately. "I should have stopped him," he admitted quietly. Franklin studied him carefully. "Why didn't you?" Cole answered honestly. "Because I was scared of losing my career." Franklin nodded slowly. "That's how bad systems survive." The younger deputy looked shattered. "Do you hate me?" Franklin considered the question longer than expected. Finally, he answered softly, "No, but I wish courage came sooner." Cole accepted that truth silently. Weeks later, federal prosecutors finalized plea negotiations with Connor Pike. The former deputy looked thinner now, hollow-eyed, permanently exhausted. Prison changed shape long before sentencing arrived. Inside a secure meeting room, Pike finally broke completely. "I never meant for this to happen," he whispered. Jerome Mitchell stared coldly across the table. "You meant every second until consequences arrived." Pike lowered his head. For once, no arrogance remained, only fear. He signed the plea agreement 30 minutes later. Guilty. Civil rights violations, destruction of property, obstruction, federal cooperation regarding county corruption. The signature felt strangely small, considering how many lives collapsed behind it. Late one snowy evening, Franklin Hayes returned again to his garage in Decatur. The empty parking space remained untouched. No replacement vehicle, no expensive upgrades, just silence. He carried Evelyn Carter's letter folded carefully inside his coat pocket. Then he noticed something resting beside the wall, a dusty cardboard box his mother left earlier. Inside sat old photographs, Walter Hayes beside mail trucks, Walter fishing during rare vacations, Walter smiling beside church friends. At the bottom rested one final picture Franklin never saw before, a younger Walter standing outside the Ferrari dealership decades earlier, smiling proudly beside the showroom window and written across the back in faded ink. Dreams matter because they remind us we survived long enough to have them. Franklin sat quietly beside the empty garage space, holding the photograph, while snow drifted softly outside. For the first time since Millbrook County, tears finally came, not from anger, not from humiliation, but because he suddenly understood something his father always knew. Dreams were never measured by whether they lasted, only by whether they changed people while they existed. Federal sentencing hearings began during the final week of February, beneath gray Atlanta skies and bitter winter rain. News crews crowded courthouse entrances before sunrise, while protesters gathered quietly across nearby sidewalks, holding candles instead of signs. The anger had evolved into something heavier. Reflection. Inside courtroom 4B, former Deputy Connor Pike stood wearing county jail clothing instead of a uniform. Chains rested around his wrists where authority once lived. He looked smaller now, not physically, spiritually. The courtroom filled with journalists, former victims, federal agents, clergy members, and ordinary citizens who needed to witness accountability finally arriving. Franklin Hayes entered quietly through a side hallway wearing a dark charcoal suit and silver tie. Conversations stopped immediately when people recognized him, not because he looked powerful, because he looked composed, and dignity unsettled people who expected bitterness. Connor Pike noticed Franklin instantly. For several seconds, neither man looked away. Then Pike lowered his eyes first. Judge Eleanor Whitmore reviewed the case carefully before speaking. This court examined overwhelming evidence demonstrating deliberate abuse of constitutional authority, she stated firmly. The defendant targeted citizens based upon race, wealth perception, and institutional protection he believed guaranteed immunity. Her words echoed across complete silence. Law enforcement power exists to protect rights, not violate them. Pike's attorney requested leniency based upon cooperation and public pressure. Federal prosecutors responded coldly. Public trust cannot survive when officers behave like predators, one prosecutor argued. Then Judge Whitmore turned toward Franklin. Agent Hayes, would you like to make a victim impact statement? Franklin stood slowly. Every camera inside the courtroom focused immediately. He approached the podium calmly while winter light filtered through tall courthouse windows. My father served this country before many people in this room were born, Franklin began quietly. He believed America improved slowly because ordinary people kept demanding better from it. Several jurors from earlier proceedings listened carefully from gallery seats. Franklin continued. Connor Pike destroyed my car, but the car itself was never the deepest loss. He paused briefly. The real damage came from understanding how comfortable injustice became inside systems designed to prevent it. Pike stared downward, motionless. Most people who experience what happened to me never receive cameras, lawyers, federal investigators, or national attention. They receive trauma, then silence. Franklin's voice softened. That should concern every citizen regardless of politics, race, or profession. Complete stillness filled the courtroom. I don't hate Connor Pike. Hatred solves nothing. But accountability matters because future victims deserve better chances than previous ones received. He stepped away from the podium quietly. No dramatic gestures, no revenge, just truth. Judge Whitmore delivered sentencing 30 minutes later. 54 months in federal prison, permanent prohibition from law enforcement employment nationwide, full restitution obligations, mandatory testimony in ongoing corruption investigations. Connor Pike closed his eyes briefly after hearing the sentence. Then federal marshals escorted him away forever from the profession he once abused proudly. Outside the courthouse, snow flurries drifted unexpectedly across Atlanta streets while reporters rushed toward Franklin. He stopped only once. A young black journalist asked quietly, "After everything that happened, do you still believe justice exists?" Franklin considered the question carefully. Then he answered honestly, "Justice exists when ordinary people refuse to look away." Across Millbrook County, reforms continued for months afterward under federal oversight. New civilian review boards formed, mandatory body camera protections expanded, wrongful arrest investigations reopened. Several corrupt county officials faced criminal charges tied to detention contracts and unlawful quotas. The system finally confronted itself publicly, not perfectly, but honestly. Evelyn Carter returned quietly to teaching community history classes at her church fellowship hall, renovated partly through anonymous donations Franklin arranged privately. She never mentioned the money publicly. Some kindness worked better without recognition. Deputy Travis Cole resigned from law enforcement 6 months later. Instead, he began speaking at ethics seminars for criminal justice students across Georgia. His presentations carried one difficult title: "Silence Helps Abuse Survive." Spring eventually returned to Atlanta. One warm Sunday afternoon, Franklin Hayes drove his silver Honda Accord toward his mother's house beneath blooming dogwood trees. Gospel music played softly through open windows while sunlight stretched across familiar roads. Nothing looked dramatic, nothing looked historic, just another son visiting home. Eleanor Hayes greeted him at the doorway, smiling warmly. "You're late," she teased. Franklin laughed quietly. "Traffic this time." After dinner, he walked alone briefly through the neighborhood where Walter Hayes once delivered mail decades earlier. Children played basketball beside cracked sidewalks while older neighbors waved from porches. Life continued, messy, complicated, beautiful anyway. That evening before leaving, Franklin paused beside his father's framed photograph inside the hallway. Walter still smiled proudly from another lifetime. Franklin touched the frame gently. "We got the red one, Dad," he whispered. Outside, sunset painted Georgia skies deep crimson for several quiet moments, almost the exact color of a Ferrari. And somehow, despite everything lost beside that highway in Millbrook County, Franklin finally understood the dream survived anyway. Not inside a car. Inside the people brave enough to protect dignity when power tried destroying it. Because justice was never really about winning, it was about refusing surrender. Subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, and share this video.